It's time for episode 41 of The Crisis Show here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube. My name is Rich Klein, president of Rich Klein Crisis Management and founder and host of The Crisis Show. Welcome. So what I'd like to do tonight is talk about some organizations that are in the news this week. Either they were in a crisis situation, or they're trying to repair a crisis situation, or maybe they just didn't handle a media interview the way they should have. So let's first look at Walmart. Walmart this week settled a major lawsuit involving allegations that it dumped hazardous waste in various parts of California. Now, the lawsuit was reported by the Associated Press and Reuters, two of the largest wire services in the world, and Walmart put out a news release that it did post on its website. However, my point is, when you have bad news and you know the media is on top of it, it doesn't serve your reputation well if you try to bury the bad news, as Walmart did. For example, the suit settled for close to $82 million. And that, of course, is the lead of the AP story and the Reuters story that ran yesterday. And that was Tuesday, May 28th. But in Walmart's news release, the settlement amount was sort of like in a footnote at the very bottom of the news release. And all the other information in the news release were all these points about all the supposedly great things Walmart is doing and has done over the years to protect the environment. So there was a real disconnect between the news story that people are reading and the official news release. Now that's expected. You don't expect a news release to be picked up exactly by Associated Press or Reuters or any other major media outlet. But having said that, you want to get the bad news out quickly and get rid of it, and not try to bury it, because that way it looks like you're hiding something. It's just like when you say no comment, right? So you don't want to bury the bad news. You want to put it out there, get rid of it, show people that you've dealt with it, and move on. But trying to hide it when the media is on top of it, big mistake. Next, I want to discuss Rutgers University and its twice tarnished athletic department. Rutgers University has been in the news a lot in the last 6 months, mostly because of the men's basketball program. Let me give you some background. Back in November 2012, the administration of Rutgers was in receipt of a DVD that showed former men's basketball coach Mike Rice verbally abusing and physically abusing his players. These were videos that were shot at various practices over a period of time when Eric Murdoch, the former director of player development, was in his position. Now, Murdoch turned this video over to Rutgers in November 2012. This led to an internal investigation, the hiring of an outside law firm to investigate in November, and by December 13th, 2012, Rutgers announced that Rice would be suspended without pay for 3 games. He was fined $50,000, and he was also ordered to undergo anger management counseling. This all happened before this video actually went public and viral, and that happened in early April 2013 when ESPN aired these clips which showed Mike Rice using gay slurs, pushing his players, throwing basketballs at them, and so forth. After the airing, the public airing, Mike Rice was then fired on April 3rd. His assistant basketball coach, Jimmy Martelli, resigned. That was followed by the resignation of athletic director Tim Pernetti on April 5th. Fast forward now to late May 2013, when Rutgers announces the appointment of a new athletic director, someone by the name of Julie Herman. Now, Julie Herman's supposed to start her job on June 17th. But this past week, there was news that surfaced and a video on 2 fronts. One, it showed the news surfaced that while Herman was head basketball coach of the women's team at University of Tennessee, she was also allegedly verbally abusive to her players. And she was also reported to be, by a few media outlets, at the center of a discrimination lawsuit that led to the termination of her assistant basketball coach, who claimed that because she was going to become pregnant, she was terminated. So you have this new athletic director who also has a questionable background. Now, as of now, Robert Bocci, the Rutgers president, and Governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, are standing by Julie Herman, but Christie said that he will leave this as an internal matter, let Rutgers deal with this internally. But public perception is so important right now, and Rutgers is on thin ice because of the incidents surrounding Mike Rice and Tim Pernetti and what happened in late 2012 and earlier this year. Once again, Rutgers finds itself in a crisis situation. If they keep Julie Herman, and if Robert Bocci stays in his job, the questions will continue and continue about the integrity of Rutgers athletic department and its administration under Robert Bocci. The smart thing to do, I believe, if I was advising Rutgers, would be to, first of all, get rid of Julie Herman and find somebody who's got an impeccable background. They obviously did not do the due diligence in the hiring because, again, perception is reality. And just the fact that there were allegations and questions remaining about the way Julie Herman treated her players isn't going to serve Rutgers well going forward. It's really going to be difficult to operate in that kind of environment. By the same token, Robert Bocci is at the top of this university, and his judgment has also been called into question repeatedly long before the Julie Herman situation. So a smart thing for the Rutgers administration to do would be to clean house, get rid of Herman, get rid of Robert Bocci, and start fresh. It's the only way the questions and the crisis will go away. The next subject I want to discuss is Royal Caribbean Cruise, Royal Caribbean International to be exact. Now, this is a story with a good ending, particularly in contrast to the Carnival Cruise incident a few months ago, in which passengers were stranded for a few days, and there was a real failure in crisis management and in crisis communications in that incident. But in this incident this past week, Royal Caribbean is getting high marks for the way it handled not only the actions it took, which is the crisis management, emergency management component, but also the public relations effort, the crisis communications effort, in the way it communicated with its critical audiences and the media. So let's look at a few things that Royal Caribbean did right. First of all, when the fire broke out, it made sure its passengers were safe. And while this initial crisis was going on, the people back in the main office were already arranging for charter flights for all the passengers to get to their destination. So they weren't just waiting for the initial crisis to be over before they were thinking ahead. So I'm reading right now from Royal Caribbean International's Facebook page from a woman named Claudia McGurk. And I'm going to read this because you can't buy this kind of advertising. Claudia McGurk: my husband and I just got home from the Grandeur voyage. And Grandeur was the name of the ship, by the way. Just got home from the Grandeur voyage to the Bahamas. We are grateful to be home safe and sound, doing normal things like laundry and catching up with family and friends. RCC, Royal Caribbean, did a great job in handling a very unexpected event. The mobile fire team did their job efficiently and quickly. Muster captains kept their groups calm and taken care of. It's not easy to muster and then process 2,200 plus passengers off a tiny island unprepared for handling that kind of volume. We were kept informed, fed, reassured, and given free phone internet to touch base with home. The airport leg of the journey was long and tedious, but the Royal Caribbean staff stayed close to help with all that they were able. We are Diamond members, and this was not our first voyage, but it was our first major event while on board. I give huge kudos to the professionalism with which Royal Caribbean performed throughout. Great job. This comment on the Royal Caribbean International Facebook page happened about 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on May 29th, has almost 200 likes. That's a really good sign. I also want to point out an Associated Press story also that came out earlier today that showed just what a great job. The headline says, Royal Caribbean praised for its response to ship fire. You can't buy this kind of headline or buy this kind of publicity, even in good times. So this was the Associated Press story that broke earlier this morning. Just a great story all around, because even interviews with passengers. Now remember, contrast this with the Carnival cruise situation where the passengers were emailing photos and videos of the horrible conditions aboard their ship. These passengers are coming back and say, hey, yeah, it was a tough situation, but we were guided, we were kept informed. We felt like Royal Caribbean was in control. You can't, as a company, ask for a better outcome after a situation like this. So Royal Caribbean should be a case study for all cruise lines, but also other companies that are faced with these kinds of potential disaster situations. And obviously a disaster was averted here. The other thing that Royal Caribbean did right, and maybe they learned from the Carnival cruise situation, is immediately sent their CEO and other executives to the port of call and talked to the passengers and made sure things that were supposed to happen were happening in terms of handling the crisis, in terms of surveying the damage and so forth. Overall, when you look at the media coverage, when you look at social media and the way that Royal Caribbean communicated authentically and effectively and quickly on Facebook and Twitter, they get high marks. So they did a really good job at navigating this. So we're glad to be able to report that. The final segment tonight is about Apple CEO Tim Cook. Now, let me just put a disclaimer out there. Apple is not in crisis mode, but the CEO has to come to a media interview prepared. Show some enthusiasm. Last night, Tuesday, May 28th, Tim Cook appeared with Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher, who do this great conference every year called All Things Digital, and they interview in front of an audience executives of technology companies. Now, no one expects Tim Cook to be like Steve Jobs. He was the master. We all know that. But having said that, Tim Cook just looked like he didn't want to be there. And he obviously, for a man of such immense wealth, couldn't afford media training. And, no, seriously, he went in there and made a bunch of basic media relations mistakes. The first of which was this. When Walt Mossberg opened the interview and said, "Is Apple in trouble?" Tim Cook sat there for a few seconds and said, "Is Apple in trouble?" So he repeated the negative. Big no-no. Never repeat a negative question by a reporter. I don't know what he was thinking, but that just goes out there. And it validates in the public mind that maybe there is a problem, just the fact that you repeated it. So that was mistake number one. Number two, Tim Cook did not come with any news of any value. It appeared, and I looked at the social media, and I looked at video, and looked at some websites. The media they were dying for some real news, and you could see they were stretching, even in their headlines and their blogs and their news stories, putting out things that really weren't newsworthy, but they have a job to do. They have to pretend that Tim Cook actually made some news because, hey, their editor sent them there or sent them to monitor this briefing with Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher, and there was really very little new, except maybe that he has this grand vision of an Apple TV, and that maybe Google Glass isn't a wonderful idea. Maybe it might be better on the wrist. But that's really it. Nothing grand was announced, which is typical of Apple. But he also, from his body language and his comments, when he said, "I'm not going to talk about that, I'm not going to talk about that, I'm not going to answer that," those are very defensive positions, and there are other ways to be amicable in an interview and friendly in an interview, and you don't have to give away your trade secrets. There are other ways you could interact with the media without being so defensive and visibly defensive. So Tim Cook gets some media training. My gosh, I could give you many people who are out in California who are wonderful media trainers. So check out this interview that Tim Cook did with Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher. It's really interesting dynamic if you're a student of crisis communications and corporate communications. Some real good lessons there. But most important is, if you're going to sit down with reporters, at least make it look like you're glad to be there, that you're, and more importantly, that you're passionate about your company and your products. Tim Cook just didn't seem excited about anything except maybe getting off that stage. Again, not that anybody expects him to be the genius presenter that Steve Jobs was, but there is a middle ground, and Tim Cook needs to do a better job, not because of people like me watching him, but because a CEO is so closely aligned with a corporate brand. And if he's not enthusiastic and passionate about Apple products, then how could he expect us to be as consumers, right? Well, that wraps up another edition of The Crisis Show here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube. If you'd like to tweet about anything you heard tonight, please use hashtag The Crisis Show or at The Crisis Show. That is our Twitter account. You can also like us on YouTube. It's The Crisis Show channel on YouTube. You could subscribe to us. You could also visit our page on Facebook. It's The Crisis Show page on Facebook, where we have show notes and other commentary throughout the week. And finally, if you want to be a guest on the show, please send an email to Rich, R-A-C-H, at thecrisisshow.com. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you soon.